you who don't, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cindy Miles, and I'm the president and CEO of the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber. I've been working with nonprofits for many years, and I have a certification through BoardSource to do board governance training, and I'm quite passionate about helping and supporting nonprofit organizations. So I'd love to have each of you introduce yourselves, if you wouldn't mind, and just kind of tell me what your role is with the Child Advocacy Center that you're associated with. I love child advocacy centers. I served on the board of an organization called Sunlight Children's Advocacy and Rights Foundation, which is now called Sunlight Children's Services, out in Butler County for about 10 years. And so I love the work that you do, but I'd love to find out just who you are.
I'll go ahead and start. I'm Paige White, and I'm the coordinator of member services for the state chapter. So the Children's Advocacy Centers of Kansas. And yeah, that's my role. So is there anything else, or that was it?
Nope, that was it.
Okay, perfect.
And Dorothy says she doesn't have video or audio, her camera or audio, so she's going to listen today.
And she's with Hope Unlimited in Iowa.
Okay. I'm familiar with Hope Unlimited. What about Deb?
I'm Deb Cook. I've been on the board of the Child Advocacy Center 6 years, off a couple years, back on again. So I've been involved for quite a while. Yeah.
Very good. And Bev?
Last but not least, I am with the newest Children's Advocacy Center that serves Douglas County.
Okay.
And I serve many roles, but I'm the executive director, but also do direct service.
Mm-hmm.
We just have a staff of 2. And then I think that's it for me.
So a staff of 2. That's pretty, that's small. But congratulations.
Very small. So I was hired in February.
Okay.
And then, so I do family advocacy, but we hired our first full-time family advocate, and she started in June.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But, I come from Sunflower House. And so I come from a much more bigger population area, experience-wise. And so it's definitely a smaller community, but compared to rural Kansas, it's not really that small. So,
sure.
And I'm currently finishing an MPA program at UMKC. And so, all of this is really relevant because I'm working on my final capstone. Well, I still have a few classes left, but my final project this week. And part of what I'm doing is kind of a manual for an even newer nonprofit than me, and having, like when you said BoardSource, that was one of the recommendations, was you all and BoardSource and stuff for someone who doesn't have that nonprofit experience but has a nonprofit now, and so helping guide them. So I really appreciate all that you have to share.
Yeah, you bet. Well,
That's our newest location in Lawrence, and I foresee that in the next couple of years she'll have a staff of 17, and she so
that's great.
Starting out.
I hope, because these multiple hats can be a struggle some days.
Yes. I have worn multiple hats myself. When I came to the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber 5.5 years ago, it was me. We now have a staff of 6, but it was just me, and I wore all of those hats. So I get it. So we'll just get started for today. And so I want to talk a little bit. I want to start out today just kind of talking about, and none of this stuff will surprise you, but some of the demands for the future in regards to nonprofit organizations are, we've got to figure out how we work more effective. I know that's something on an ongoing basis. How do we do more with less? How do we work more efficiently? How do we spread our lack of money, time, and energy, the most efficient way that we can? And then how do we continue to be accountable, not only to the people that we serve, to the donors that we have, to our committee members, or any other of our stakeholders? And so I see this demand continuing to grow over the years. I know in regards to certainly in efficiency and money, and the last couple of years have taken a huge toll on nonprofit organizations because money has been redirected, grant funding's been redirected to pandemic related things. And so I just like to talk a little bit about this as we start off. And again, I know that none of these things are surprising to you in the work that you do, but I just want to bring them out there. So I want to talk a little bit. Do all of you or any of you have a governance committee?
Yes.
Yes, no. So some organizations, I'm going to recommend as we go through this presentation, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a governance committee. Some organization, this is such a huge thing for an effectively operating board. And I talk to a lot of nonprofit organizations that maybe have a nominating committee and their whole role is to just bring in new board members or, find people that are willing to serve, and or maybe they're reviewing bylaws. But I'm going to recommend if you don't have a governance committee, you think about having a governance committee to have your board be a little bit more effective, and certainly the recruiting process to help that be effective as well. And so generally when I think of a governance committee, they don't just review bylaws, they don't just do nominating. And I can't, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Somebody else is joining. Oh, there's Josh. So the governance committee, I have a calendar that I can send you out if you'd like to have about what I perceive as a governance committee doing year round, because they play a huge role within our organization. So some of those things are not just leading the board recruitment, as we talked about, but kind of working on putting together an orientation process for the organization to make sure that board orientation for new board members happens on a regular basis, as well as other educational efforts, including ongoing board development. The governance committee can take that on and kind of think of ways that you can educate the people that are on your board. We here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber started something earlier this year where we have 5 minutes at the beginning of our board meeting. Good grief, it's Monday. To do a short little board training, and it might be a 5-minute thing on social media and just reminding the board members how they can post Google reviews on the Google that you find online when you Google your organization. It might be reminding them to share posts on social media and reminding them of what social media we use. So that's one of the things, the governance committee can oversee that board development. They really need to help clarify the board roles and responsibilities, and not just what they are now, but as they change, as your life cycle of your organization might change, the board responsibilities might get smaller. You might very much have a very active working board that eventually transcends into less of a working board because you add more staff and you don't have to have them do everything that they may have had to do when the organization was formed. They can also help you with assessing the board effectiveness and overseeing a board assessment every couple of years, just to assess how your board is doing. They can ensure board leadership. So you have a succession plan for your board that identifies who's willing to step up and lead, because generally you have a chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. That's the general officer structure. But when you recruit board members, of course, it's important to identify people that'll come on your board so that when the vice chair moves up to the chair and you need somebody to serve as vice chair, you have somebody kind of lined up to do that. And you're not asking, was somebody willing to serve in this role, and everybody at the table is looking down? Because, the first one that looks up might be the one that gets, gets nominated for that or whatever. So
Cindy, we just had that happen because we had someone on our board who got promoted to a state position.
yes,
So they're still on the board, but they didn't want to serve in their role anymore.
yes.
And I'm not kidding you when I say, I think it was brought up 4 months in a row and nobody was taking it. And then all of a sudden at the last board meeting, somebody was like, oh, I see that this is needed. I can do that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it really also made me realize that people aren't paying attention at the level that I think they're paying attention, or they're not reading. They're also not reading the notes or, the
Yes.
reports that they're sent, because
Yes.
this was said over and over again. So it made me think twice about feeling bad if somebody doesn't respond right away.
Yes.
And remembering, what did they say? Say it again, say it
Yes.
in writing.
Yes.
Say it. So
Right. Yeah.
that's just
Yes.
my two
Yes.
recent lesson learned. I'm learning a lot of lessons, but that was a recent one.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very true. So that board leadership, overseeing the succession plan, not only as I just spoke about for board members, but overseeing the succession planning for the executive director is certainly important in those nominations. So the governance committee has a huge role in the organization, and so many nonprofits I see downplay that, but it's so huge, not only in the organization, but in having effectiveness within your organization. So I always want to talk about the importance of the governance committee and why you should have one.
Cindy, I do have a question about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
No, please ask any questions you want. This is your time.
A quick question. So since we're at the stage where we have a strategic plan now, so we have a couple committees that we need, and so we're trying to get people to sign up for that. Would you say that those committees, say like a finance committee and the others, that this should just be another one listed? Or how do you feel about the timing of that? Or my concern is we're already struggling to get people on those few committees for the strategic plan stuff. So I'm just thinking through whether this should be an addition to, or if it's one of those where we should just kind of get our feet under us first.
Yes. However, the governance committee can also kind of help to take on that role to make sure strategic planning happens every year. And that's another good role for them to take on.
Mm-hmm.
So I certainly think, and I have another presentation I do just all about committees, but I think certainly have those two work together would be great. So we're going to talk today a little bit about the board building cycle, and this is kind of what that cycle looks like for boards. So it never ends. It's going on and on all the time, no matter whether it's in the process, whether you're in the process of this moment at taking nominations or looking for people to serve. So you're continually, or you should be continually identifying potential board members. And if you've got committees, and I may mention this later in this presentation, but if you've got committees and you're allowing people outside of your board to serve on your committees, which I strongly recommend. I don't think everybody on your committee should be strictly from your board. It's a great way to engage community members, other connections that you have, and let them become familiar with your organization, become familiar with the work, develop a pipeline for potential future board members by letting people outside of your board serve on your committees. So you're always going through that process of identifying who do you know, who do you have connections with, who have you met with, who have you run across, whatever. And then, of course, after you identify those people, then you're building those relationships, and those types of things. Then you go through the recruiting process, the orientation process, you involve them, educate them. Then you're going through the process of evaluating performance and rotating new members always out. In, old members out, and you just start that process all over again. But we're going to talk about this more in depth. So step one, identifying board needs. And I'm going to share another document with you here in just a moment. But when you look at strategically recruiting people to your board, that means not just bringing everybody that you know together or all your friends or whatever. It's really important to identify what's actually needed on your board and identify people that will fill the gaps that are on your board. So I'm going to share with you a document that I will also send out to you, which I do with organizations. It's like a board needs assessment matrix. But let me stop sharing this and I will share this other document. Maybe. No, I totally will if I can get this clicking to work. Here we go. You know, I've been using Zoom avidly for several years, and I don't know why I've got to have times that it just doesn't work in the way that I want it to work. All right, give me just a second. Sorry. There we go. So this is what BoardSource lovingly calls Tool 9. I call it a board matrix worksheet. And it really will guide you through the process of assessing where the gaps are on your board. And again, I will email this out to you so you can go through this process. And while I tell people that I help with nonprofit startups that are first building their board, because I take them through this process of building a board, while these things here that you can see, you know, certainly diversity on your board of age. I serve on a board where me and I'm 59, and another guy who's 58 are the youngins. Everybody else on this board is over 80. And they needed some, and me and the guy that's 58, we're relatively new. So they've been literally their board members, unfortunately, are dying off, and their board has been reduced to not much of anything. So they don't, and age is important. That's what I want to communicate to you. Certainly that diversity of age and gender is important, as well as this race, ethnicity. But what I really want to talk to you about today in regarding to this board matrix workshop, and again, this is a template that I'll send out to you. You might need to adapt it in some ways, but it's so important when you create your boards that you look at people that have resources, access to resources, so money to give, access to money, access to other resources, availability for active participation in the board, doing the work. It's important that you build boards of people that have community connections, and those might be religious organizations, corporate education, the other things that you see listed here. It's certainly important to create a diversity of these different types of leadership qualities, willingness to work, and these personal styles. So you need a combination, you know, I tell some people, you know, you've got to have some detail people, you got to have some visionary people, you got to have people that can implement, you have to have people with different styles. But the other thing that's so very important is looking at making sure that you have people, especially if you're a smaller organization, that have administration management experience, that maybe are entrepreneurial, certainly that have financial management experience, whether it be accounting, investments. You have to have people with fundraising experience, knowledge. You might want to have people that are connected to the government or know something about law, marketing, public relations, HR, strategic planning. So it's good. And if you have a building, it's good to have somebody that knows something about building maintenance, possibly if you don't have somebody in that role. So these are just some ideas. And again, you can adapt this, but the way this process works is if board member number one was to go down this row and check off what they have in regards to these strengths and skills and stuff. And board number two was to do the same and go on through your entire board. You would go across here and you would look at, okay, what do you have on your board? What kind of resources or access to resources do you have? And if you have, people that you don't have anybody that has checked off any of these lists about money to give or access to money, that might be an area where you need to identify some people that have that. If you go through and these are important community connections, and let's say everybody on here, community connections, really has connections to social services, but maybe none of these other areas. Those might be areas where you might need to recruit from. Same with down here. If there's areas down here that these really could contribute to what you do and you don't have anybody that has those skills, you can use this to identify, well, who should you recruit, and not just add warm bodies to your board. Any questions about that? We also offer this as we can work with organizations to set up a survey that their board members do and then send you the results. So if that makes it any easier, but this is a pretty easy tool to use. But I just want to make sure before I send it to you, you don't have any questions about how to use this. Nope. Diana, you've seen this probably more than once.
Yeah, ours looks a little different. I do see a couple of things on there that ours doesn't have. So I'll be interested to just compare the two and see if we need to update ours.
Yeah, very good. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so that's kind of your identifying what your board needs. What kind of people do you add to your board? That's kind of I think that's the best way to do that is connect, just create that assessment and do it with the matrix. Oh, I guess I didn't need that slide there. Same one. So the step 2 is going to be to cultivate those potential leaders for your board. So some of the ways that you can do that is that you can certainly ask the current board members, ask the senior staff or other staff within the organization who they know, ask them to suggest potential candidates for the organization, and then invite those candidates to connect with the organization. So maybe they come to an event, maybe they get together with some of you for lunch, maybe they come to a committee meeting. There's a lot of different ways that you can work to cultivate those potential board members. Find ways to get them interested in your organization and keep them informed about what the organization's doing so they kind of get a feel for the organization. Now, if you already have some of these people involved with your committees, then you've got a step up on actually doing that cultivating. But that's going to be your next step, is to think about how you can cultivate them. Now, I want to ask you a question. Whose ultimate role is it to do some of this work? Whose ultimate role is it to recruit board members to your board?
The boards.
That is correct. Everybody else got that right? Yeah. So if you serve an executive director role, certainly can be a part of that process. But ultimately, if you look around the table and you're short 6 board members or whatever, that ultimately falls on the board to do that work. Oh my goodness, they're testing the sirens because it's Monday. So I'd like to break you all down, if you don't mind. We're going to do an idea hunt and just do a couple of groups since there's not a lot of us. 1, 2, 3. Let's see if I can see how many people I have on here because I minimize my view. All right, so there's enough. I'm going to break you off into 2 even groups, I guess, as even as I can. And I want you all to just think about 3 ideas, talk about 3 ideas on where you might potentially find some good board members and share with the other groups. Is that clear as mud? And then kind of write down some of the ideas you learned. We'll just do this for a couple of minutes. I'm really struggling technology these days. We'll give you about probably 3 minutes, I guess. That's fine. And here we go. Welcome back. So I'm curious, did anybody come up with any great ideas on where to find potential board members? Or what ideas did you come up with?
Mine was for a committee more than the board. And I said I got all of mine from the gym.
Okay.
I mean, I think Diana and I had similar things as far as other committees that we're serving on, or church leadership, or like Young Professionals of America, or different organizations that kind of support the same mission, but then counterpart of that is the same organizations. You feel like you're tapping out the same people, or, you know, they're already serving on 3 other boards. And so
Talked a little bit about how sometimes it is almost like hiring for a job. You have to figure out where you can advertise, so to speak, that you're looking for a board member. So
Yes.
whether that's through the nonprofit association or through Junior League, we've used them before, and several other places like that, especially if we're like Junior League was super successful when we needed someone with financial experience, and they put out a call for that. So that was really helpful. I think more than just this general, we're looking for board members. We really were targeting the
Yep.
particular skills that we needed.
Yep. Other thoughts? Ideas? All right. So step 3 is start your recruitment process. So kind of describe why a prospective board member is wanted and needed. Kind of look at what kind of skills and stuff that they're going to need. Make sure that you explain to that prospect that you're meeting with what the responsibilities are, and certainly don't minimize that. I have been after nonprofits for years to not recruit somebody and say, all we need from you is to come to a board meeting once a month for 1 hour, because you need board members that are willing to do so much more. You want people that are going to be engaged with your organization. You want people, especially the smaller the organization you are, the more important it is that you'll get people that are willing to take some time, serve on a committee. I don't know if you all have board commitment forms in place. Is there anybody that doesn't have a board commitment form in place? Nope. So, make sure you review that board commitment form with them that outlines what the expectation is about board meetings and giving, because certainly it's important for every board member to give something financially to the organization. If you expect them to serve on a committee or 2 committees or participate in a big event that you have annually, or whatever those expectations are, lay them out in that board commitment form. Certainly invite them to ask questions, kind of find out what their interest is. Is this a good match for them? Do they have the time to serve? Are they able to make the board meetings when you happen to have them? Another important question these days is, more nonprofit organizations have gone to doing their board meetings on Zoom. So are they familiar with the technology? I serve on a board that we haven't seen a board member participate in months and months and months because he's not comfortable with the Zoom technology. So, all those things are important to find out as you have the conversation with them. Any questions about that recruitment process? So then your orientation, everybody do orientation. Oh, goodness, no, stop. Thought I put my phone on silent and then it made noise again. Everybody do orientation. Yes. So when you do orientation, I'll just review a few things that you ought to include in your orientation when you do it. Again, making sure that you provide a good orientation to your board members, your new board members, is very helpful in helping to create that successful board and make sure that they operate, make sure that they have enough information to operate effectively and to be able to make decisions for the organization. So letting them know the history of the organization, when you were formed, so they can go out as they're out there in the community and intelligently talk about the organization that they're serving on the board of. So knowing when the organization started, what, how they've grown, being very familiar with the programs that the organization has, so they can talk about those as well out in the community. And so they can know if there's ways that they could help with anything related to your programming, any pressing issues that the organization has. So if you've got something going on within your organization that you're going through, the board member needs to know that up front. That needs to not be a surprise for them. Just as your organization wouldn't, a board wouldn't want to hire an executive director and not educate that executive director that the organization has massive financial problems or some other issue. You want to educate those board members to what's going on within the organization, what challenges you're facing. You want to educate them about the facilities that you have, whether it's one facility, several facilities, maybe take them on a tour of the facility. If you don't do that, you'd want to provide them with an organizational chart of the structure of the organization. And that's really important for board members to know who they can reach out to about issues within the organization or who's doing what, those types of things. And then you want to orient them to the board. So they need to know, what is the committee structure like? Providing them descriptions of what those committees actually do is important. I know when we do board orientation here, we have this conversation about what our committees do when they meet, and we try to nail them down right then about what committee do they want to serve on if it hasn't been done prior. So from then on, then they're tied to one of our committees, because we require them to be our board members to be involved in at least one committee. It's good to have a written description of what the board members' responsibilities are in your orientation. Also have a list of the board members, the other board members that serve on the board, as well as the key staff within the organization. You might also include a list of who serves on what committees. So people know that as well, and they can kind of look at the committees overall, and you can have that discussion with them as you're talking about the committee's structure, about where if you've got 9 people on the finance committee and 2 people on the governance committee, maybe you want to kind of direct them towards the governance committee. But it's important for them to know about that as well. You want to make sure that they're familiar with the bylaws. It's important that they read through the bylaws. The bylaws are their operating guide for your board of directors. And then providing them at least a couple of your recent minutes from recent board meetings is really important, so they can kind of get an idea of what's gone on at the last couple of meetings. So when they set in on their first board meeting, they can at least have read through maybe some of the discussion that's happened. Any other things that you all do that you think would be great to add to this list? I base mine off what Board Source says, so. Nope. Okay. So then the next thing is involving those board members. So you don't want them to come to the board table and not be engaged with the organization. And ironically, we have a program here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber. And remember, you all are all members of the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber through your state association. So we have a board member matchup program here, and we work with mostly young professionals to get them on nonprofit boards. We go through a process of assessing their skills and strengths and those types of things and match them up with something that is really of an interest to them. They might be really passionate about. But as I've worked with some of those people to match them, what I found is some of them have told me they've served on a nonprofit board before, but they didn't really get engaged because they didn't know what they were supposed to do. They just go to meetings and they would just sit and listen. And young professionals aren't always just excited about going to another meeting where they just sit and listen to what goes on and they don't have an idea of what they're supposed to be doing. And ironically, I've heard from executive directors that brought young professionals in that the young professionals often didn't do anything. And I wonder how often that happens because the young professional didn't really know what they were supposed to be doing. So just make sure that, you involve them, kind of identify what their strengths are when they're available. And again, that ties back to those committees. And I don't want to forget to mention, just because one gets involved in a committee, don't tie them down to that committee forever. Here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber, every year, we allow our board members, if they want to switch committees, when we're bringing on new board members, they want to switch committees and try out a different one. Certainly, we want them to try out a different committee. Sitting on the development committee year after year, the governance committee or whatever can get rather boring, I guess. And it's always good for a board member to take a year and serve on the finance committee just so they know more about the finances of the organization. So think about that as well in regards to your involvement. You can assign them a board buddy. So somebody that's been on the board a little bit longer, that they know that they can call if they've got particular questions or whatever. And then they don't have to always put those questions out to the executive director specifically, or even the board chair. Certainly solicit feedback from those board members and, find out how are you doing at engaging? How else would they like to be engaged? That's really important. And then express your appreciation, but also hold people accountable. So boards really can't have board members that don't come to meeting after meeting after meeting, or committee meetings or whatever. They really do need to be held accountable. And I do see that's a huge issue I see come up here when people call me and they want to know, what do I do about a board member that hasn't shown up for the past 3 meetings and we haven't heard from them, or they haven't shown up for the last 6, but they have called every time and said that they couldn't be there. And my response back is, well, what do your bylaws say? And do whatever your bylaws say. And if your bylaws don't address how to deal with that issue, then make sure you add that to your bylaws, because that could be, they don't show up for 2 meetings. It could be that you send them an email. If they don't respond, you send them a letter. And ultimately, I just want you to know that's the board chair's responsibility to do that. It is not the executive director's role to have to do that work. Any questions or other thoughts about involving? Okay. So then educating. Yes, ma'am. No,
Can
don't
you go back to the last bullet point on that one, just appreciation. Do you have some suggestions, like how often, those are things I struggle with. I mean, how often do you do something? What do you do as the executive director for the board?
Sure. And I think there's a number of different ways you can show appreciation for your board of directors. Remembering their birthdays, remember their anniversaries, sending out a get well card if they happen to be ill, just reminding them at a board meeting. I have a habit of saying when a board member reaches out to me and they have a question or anything like that, I often wrap up my email response back with, just want to let you know how much I appreciate your service to the board. I say that repeatedly. If have a board meeting, we have a committee meeting, every opportunity I can find that little comment, just to let them know over and over, I appreciate their service to the board. And I think that's a simple thing to get into a habit of doing. I think it's nice. I think it would be nice for organizations to once a year have a lunch for their board that's not around a board meeting, or have a dinner for their board that's not around a board meeting, or have some sort of a networking event that's for the board. Because I think we as boards, we get together and we have these board meetings and we have these committee meetings, and we're doing work, but we don't spend much time just getting to know one another as board members and building that camaraderie with the board. So I think those are a few ideas, but again, that one of just constantly saying, I think that's a simple way to just let them know that you appreciate them. Anybody else have ideas on how they show appreciation to their board?
One of the boards that I'm on, they have employees like just all sign a card at the end of the year, or Christmas card or something, just to increase that connection within the organization. But yeah, it's normally just thank yous or a luncheon or a dinner once a year or something like that. They've also sometimes invited, previous job I was at, they invited the board to the staff Christmas party, which was kind of different, but they wanted the board to have that connection with the staff. And so that was something else that,
Yeah, we did that when I was on the board of Sunlight Children's Services out in Butler County. There was a Christmas party that was staff board, and that was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diana, for that question. That was a great question.
So can I ask one, not to go back? 'Cause
Yes,
I thought maybe we were going to talk about it. So tell me, just wait a minute if you're going to. On recruit, which I know is step 3, but I was hoping maybe you'll touch base on it. One of the struggles, like we were talking about, is feeling like you're tapping into the same people, or when you look at these demographics that you're trying to reach. I feel like, unfortunately, there's this thing where most of the people who serve on boards are older, or you just get this sense like it's time to volunteer or serve or, give back. And it's hard to sometimes find younger or different demographics. And so how to strategically do that in maybe other ways that somebody has not thought of. So if you're getting ready to touch on that, I'm sorry. But
I'm not getting ready to touch on that. I would have touched on that back on recruit. So if strategically recruiting young professionals, that is a huge challenge. And one of the reasons we created the board member matchup, because I think there's a lot of young people that want to serve on nonprofit boards and they don't know. Either they don't, there are some that want to serve and they literally don't know how to get onto a nonprofit board. There's others that don't even know nonprofit boards exist. And I honestly think it's our role as nonprofits all together to come together and figure out how do we educate young people about that opportunity. Not only young people, but diverse populations of people, because as we all know, certainly people, African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, Indians, certainly unrepresented on nonprofit boards, on city boards, on government boards, are just unrepresented. So every chance that you can find to communicate that you want people to serve on your board, that you're willing to take a young professional that doesn't have board experience. And I think if you bring somebody on, so we have a relatively new board member that is an attorney. He's a young attorney. And he's never served on a board. So he asks a lot of questions. I encourage him to ask a lot of questions. We've engaged him in a committee. But he knows lots of other young attorneys that want to get out there and serve on boards. And he said, we don't know how to do it. Well, he's learning. He's learned now. But I think it's really our role just as a sector to try to educate every way that we can and young professionals to look for opportunities to educate them on how they can get engaged and look for opportunities to let them know that the opportunity to serve on a nonprofit board even exists. We have Board University here, and we have scholarships that Cargill sponsors for young professionals to go through our Board University. And I had a young lady a couple of years ago that went through our Board University series, the whole series. And she said, I heard about this serving on a nonprofit board. And what I heard was, she said, I started asking a couple of people about it because I didn't know anything about it. And when I talked to a couple of other young people that I knew, and they said, oh, it's nothing. You just go to a meeting once a month for an hour. And that's all, that's all you need to do. No. Anyway, so I
I do think with the education, then you get buy-in and people who are passionate about your mission. It's just how to kind of foster those relationships long enough to where you're not like, oh, I think you're great, you should join our board. And then you made them run for the hills.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. So
Okay.
I think as we're out networking, if we can talk to young professionals, make a point of talking to young professionals, telling them what we do with our organizations, and then saying, hey, we've got some volunteer openings on our committee, or we're working, we've got a committee that's working on this event. We could certainly use some young professionals to serve. I think slowly engaging them and letting them become familiar, especially if they absolutely don't know anything about the fact that serving on a nonprofit board exists. So that's kind of what we're working on here. But I certainly want to invite other nonprofit organizations to participate in that process of educating. We work on it as hard as we can, but I think as we do it all together, more and more we can impact those young professionals and get them to serve, get them to become familiar even with nonprofit board service. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
That was a great question, though. We've got to get young people on nonprofit boards. So educate, provide it, make sure that they have information as board members on the mission and services and that they can talk through those. Work with them to explore issues facing the organization. Certainly, if you don't hold an annual retreat, holding at least an annual retreat gives board members not only just the opportunity, some organizations just get together for a board retreat for strategic planning, and maybe they just do strategic planning and they don't do any board development in that. So giving them opportunities to do board development, also sending them, like I said, we have Board University come up. Coming up. It's there's 10 sessions. They happen once a month for an hour and a half. People can fill out. We have scholarship applications to pay for them to go through the whole series. I think we have 25 or 30 scholarship applications. If they're interested in doing that, all of those will be offered hybrid. But that Board University, it's a great way to get board members involved in board development because they learn about strategically creating a board, how to do assessments, how to read financial statements, what the board chair's role is versus the executive's role. They get to go through a couple of mock board meetings and kind of see ideally how should a board meeting, how should it flow? Because some of these people, they've never been involved in a nonprofit board. They don't know what to expect. It's a little bit intimidating and scary. So give them opportunities to learn and get board development. And then, don't hide the difficulties of the organization. Certainly be open and honest about everything with your board. And then step 7 is evaluating the board. And again, that's maybe you want to do it once a year. Maybe you want to do it every couple of years. Maybe you want to do that, before new board members come on. maybe you want to do it right after new board members come on. I'd recommend if you're going to do an evaluation, you really do it right before you have new board members come on. It's kind of like strategic planning. I do strategic planning with organizations, and many organizations like to do the strategic planning. They like to coordinate that with right after new board members come on and maybe the other ones have rolled off. And I have to laugh a little bit about that, because every time I've done strategic planning and they've waited until the new board members came on, the new board members would set a strategic planning session and say, I don't really know what to say about this. I just came on the board. I don't really have any information. And it would have been better to host strategic planning with the board members that before those board members that had served for 3 years or 6 years or whatever rolled off, because they have a lot of insight to be able to offer before they roll off as board members. They've been around, they kind of know what the organization's struggles are. They're able to participate with that SWOT analysis and give feedback. And those brand new board members, they don't know. And I always think it's a little bit uncomfortable for them. So the same thing with the evaluation. If you do it right before your board members, you're going to turn over in board members, you might get a little bit different feedback than if, a third of your board has rolled off and you're conducting an assessment with 2/3 of the board members that have been around, and another third that doesn't have a clue. So the other thing that you can do is not only assess the whole board, and of course, again, if you ever need any of these ideas, templates, or whatever, I can certainly provide those to you. But we also have an individual self-assessment that allows a board member to assess, how am I myself performing? Am I coming to meetings on a regular basis? Am I participating in the committee like I should be, the committee that I committed to? Am I giving financially to the organization? So what am I really doing myself besides the board as a whole? What am I doing to contribute to the organization? So, and maybe, your organization wants to assess the whole board one year, and the next year they want to do an individual self-assessment. Whatever that looks like, assessment is not just about assessing the performance of the executive director or CEO. It's about assessing how the board is functioning as well. And then evaluating how the board and the chief executive work as a team. That's an area that I sometimes see real struggles with, maybe power struggles or whatever between the board and the chief executive. And I could tell you lots and lots of stories that I won't share with you today, but I could tell you lots and lots of stories about some of the conflict between the board and the chief executive. So that's always good to assess that and kind of make sure that that's something that you stay on top of. Are you all conducting evaluations now with your board or assessments of any kind? Yeah. It's good conversation for boards. It really is. Okay, so I'm going to break you down into breakout groups again, and I just want you to do a short exercise and kind of generate some board building ideas. So not on your own, but together, come up with 1 or 2 ideas that you might be able to share, or get ideas from others that might help to strengthen your board as it is right now. And then somebody write those down and come back and we'll share. I'm working on it. Oh, no. My Zoom quit working. God. All right. Sorry about that. It just quit. It just quit. Kansas Nonprofit Chamber. Yes. Good. How are you? Good. You do got to sign up. I'm sorry to hear that. Oh, no. Oh, no. It's good. I can't stay on the phone with you though right now because I'm in the middle of doing training and I have to bring people back from breakout rooms that they're on. So do you want to call me later? I'm training on board recruitment. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Welcome back. So does anybody have any great ideas that they would like to share about strengthening your board? Anybody come up with any great ideas?
I thought we were already strengthened. I mean, we do a lot of outside activities with fundraising, like at the Gladiator Dash, where you can bond all day while you're sweating and working out there, and
Oh my goodness.
Plus our annual meeting, we're there for 4 hours. We're eating, we're chatting. It's not just
Good.
work. So I feel like, of course, I've been on the board forever too, so maybe that makes a difference too.
Yeah. How long have you been on the board?
I did 2 3-year terms, and then I stayed on committees for a couple of years, and now I'm starting the whole thing over again. So.
Oh my goodness. That's a long time. Yes.
That's what happens when you're important people.
There you go. Suckers. I think it's called sucker.
I appreciate
Okay.
you sharing though that that's what they do, because that gives me some ideas.
Yes. Good.
I don't know if it was like a super grand idea, but one of the things I took that I really liked is you were talking about board tours. And for us, we are across all of Kansas, 17.
Yes.
Well, there's more locations, but 17 accredited centers. And so with it's not realistic or feasible for everyone to go see every location. And so coming up with a cool PowerPoint or just an introduction, because I think it also ties in with education, like, hey, this is what this place looks like, and here's some of their staff. And even if that changes, but just to kind of have an understanding so that way they can better have a grasp on like every organization that we support and what that looks like and how they run and function. And so that was something I really liked that I think would be a realistic goal for myself in the next year.
Yeah, great idea. It is a little bit harder when you've got locations across the state. But I like that idea. All right. Thank you for sharing. So then step 8 in that life cycle is rotating board members. And again, I work with some nonprofit organizations that forget to do this. They don't set terms within their bylaws. And so I literally was working on bylaws not too long ago, and their terms are that you can literally serve until you die. Until you decide to move off or until you die. And I was just like, they did not really put that in their bylaws, but they did. They really did. I'm working with them on updating those so they'll actually have some term limits in there. But make sure that you establish term limits. It's very important for all nonprofit organizations, boards, to have term limits and that they be enforced. It really isn't. I've worked with organizations where they had a board member that had served consistently for 20 years as chair. And I had to consult them through strategically removing that board chair after 20 years. So there's importance of having those terms. It brings new people on the board. It gives them an opportunity, new people to share new ideas, help maybe implement some change that needs to be made within the organization. So, certainly having those term limits is important.
Cindy, do you have a recommendation on the length of those? I noticed ours they're not all the same. And that was something I hadn't experienced at a previous job. So I just didn't know. Do you have recommendations on length?
So what do you mean they're not all the same?
Like they're different term limits.
Oh.
Like some people have 2 years, some are on 3.
Okay. So interestingly enough, when nonprofits start, they generally have to implement. So if there's going to be a 3-year term for board members, you might implement some of your board members having a 2-year term and others having 3-year terms. So you don't at any point in time have everybody on the board roll off at once, which could be disastrous. But after that initial year that the organization has started and those terms roll through, really they should be consistent. And I can just tell you that the average board terms that I hear from nonprofits these days for board members is either a 2-year term or a 3-year term. More often it's 3-year. That's repeatable either twice or three times, but no more than 3 times. And so that's 9 years on a board. That's a long time. And then generally I see that some boards will then say, if you take a year off, then you can come back and start all over again. So that's, certainly if somebody's been on a board for 9 years, they probably do need to take a year off. And then if they decide they want to come back. Now, officers, I generally see officers, so your chair, your vice chair, your secretary and treasurer, I generally see their terms as officers either being 1-year terms or 2-year terms, more commonly 2-year terms. There became a frustration, I think, with some board members and certainly chairs that they had things that they wanted to see an organization accomplish or whatever. And they set out to achieve those things. And at the end of the year, it just wasn't long enough. So they served 2-year terms. And those generally aren't renewable terms. So, some people say, oh, well, I've got to keep my treasurer because they're an accountant in that same position as treasurer for umpteen years, because we can't do without an accountant. But that's where that succession plan comes into place, where you easily burn somebody out if they have to be treasurer for 4 or 5 or 6 years. So plan strategically for recruiting people on your board and get somebody else on the board. So maybe maybe you have 2 accountants on your board, or somebody that does financial management and somebody's accountant or whatever, if you don't hire out, an accountant for your organization.
But the other part of that question, Cindy, because I pulled it up while we were talking.
Yeah.
Is now it's coming to my attention that a handful of people are done in a few weeks, or that their time is up, because this was, even though we're not officially a year, but they were together before I was here.
Yes.
So I was just, if you don't mind saying for just a quick second about how you handle when they're done. I mean, I'm assuming it's a nice thank you, but I'm also looking at this thinking, do these people even realize? I'm guessing they don't even realize that their term.
That their term is up.
Yeah.
Well, again, that governance committee should be having those conversations with those board members, so everybody is aware. Our board here, at least a couple of times a year, it seems like, for whatever reason, and certainly the governance committee, I have a spreadsheet that lists every board member we ever had and when they came on and when they went off and how long of a term that they served. But we will review that as a board, so we are aware 6 months prior to those board members rolling off, before we start going through the recruitment process of who exactly's terms are up and who are the people that are potentially going to take their places. So I think it's important to have open communication about that. Does that help?
A bit, but I think we're past that point. It's good for how it should be going forward.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, you really just need the board chair really needs to have those conversations, and, or, if you've got a nominating or governance committee, just needs to have those conversations to make sure that those people know. Are those renewable? Are those people that are rolling off, are their terms renewable?
Well, I made myself a note to check the bylaws and see what it says. I think being the first year, maybe that's a good idea to offer, another year type of situation, because we haven't even really gotten, they've got the ball rolling. Obviously we're here, we're open, we have programs like, I don't want to underplay that. I'm just looking, and one of them is the person who volunteered to be my treasurer. So for the love of Pete, I don't want that person to be gone.
Well, of course. We don't ever want to lose our treasurers.
When we very first started, we had the same kind of staggered thing. So like if you were assigned a 1 year, then you were able to renew after 1 year for your first 3 full years.
Yes.
But you weren't eligible to review for another 3 full years at that point. Although now we have had folks, when they fill an open position, that doesn't count towards the first 3 years. So they theoretically could do that. So we've kind of changed it as time has moved along, but when you do first start, it is really important that you're not leaving your board in a situation where you're going to roll everybody off at the same time.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, Diana, maybe that's why we have some 1, some 2, and some 3 years. As I'm looking at this.
That's how ours was too.
I love that. So do you now do 3-year terms kind of?
Yeah, 3-year term is always the standard now. And of course, that doesn't mean that somebody won't leave before the 3 years. Then that's where we fill that position, and then they're offered a 3-year renewal. And then they can take another 3 year after that. So they could theoretically serve longer than 6 years only in that circumstance where they're filling in an open position.
Okay, thanks, guys. That's helpful. And just one more thing for my to-do list.
Yeah, how long has your organization been open?
February 1st.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That all
they
makes
did a
perfect
really-
sense, though.
Yeah, they did a really good job. Like they had 501c3 status though, like a year ago, July.
Yeah.
But then COVID didn't help, of course. COVID
Yeah,
for
no.
everything. But I started February 1 and we officially took over space and stuff. And then it took a couple months of Paige and Julian helping us and then actually implementing and actively doing programs and stuff like that.
Yes.
So we've accomplished a lot. It's just, there's just so many balls in the air at the same time.
Sure.
So thank
Yeah,
you,
that's
everybody.
that startup year it's a fun year.
Great. It's fabulous.
It is. It is. So, a board doesn't have to automatically reelect the people that, when their term's up, they don't automatically have to let them serve another 3-year term if they've not been a good fit. Again, you can address that in your bylaws, but you got to always be considering what the board's needs are and whether that board member is, are they attending? Are they engaged? What's their performance like? What's their attitude like? Even sometimes I've seen some people in the years that I've served on nonprofit boards that maybe they had a board member that brought the whole board down or whatever. And you got to deal with those types of things. So just because they've been on the board and they have the right to renew, potentially, you don't as a board necessarily have to renew their term. So don't feel obligated to do that. And then, make sure you're developing new leadership. One of the things that we do here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber is when somebody fills out an application, of course, we're a membership organization, so we have to go through a voting process that we open to our membership. But one of the things that we ask in our application is, are you willing to, in the future, serve in a leadership role for the board? So chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer, because we want to make sure that everybody that we bring on board, of all of them, we want to make sure that we always have people that are willing to step up into leadership roles. And so we don't end up with a whole board of people that nobody ever wants to serve as the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, treasurer, because we always have to have leadership roles. So, those people that are serving, make sure that you give them opportunities to learn about how to move into those roles as well and reassure them that they can take on those roles. We have just got about 6 minutes, so I'm not going to go through this exercise, but I will send this PowerPoint to you. But something to think about is these are things to think about as far as how you might handle some of the board challenges that you have. So how would your organization handle the waning attendance of board members or a board member? I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations that they say they have committees, but their committees aren't really active, so they don't meet on a regular basis and they don't really do any work. So if that is an issue for you, what are some ways that you could handle those inactive committees? And in inactive committees, I also want to make sure that I mention you should look at defining a good committee structure for your organization based on where you're at in the growth cycle and those types of things. If you've got, I recently worked with an organization, they have 12 committees and they have 6 board members. I know, right? And so some of those committees aren't very active or not active at all because they really don't need to be. I got them to combine those 12 committees into 4 committees. So just keep an eye on those committees. And if they're truly needed and they're inactive, try to think about how do you, what's the best way to address that. I drive home the importance of committees for our organization, but as our organization has grown, we've made changes based on what the needs are, based on how many staff we have. So think about that. how do you address the poor percentage of board giving? I'll tell you how we address our board giving. We give our board members the opportunity to give at the beginning of every year. We give them a donation card. We have a minimum requirement for donation, or suggested requirement for donation, I guess. And so we pass those out at the first meeting. We expect them back by the second board meeting of the year. And if board members can either say they want to donate more, they can donate less, they can ask to have that, just issue with the check or have it billed quarterly. We break it down in several different ways. And if they don't turn in their card at the second board meeting, we invoice them for the amount that was suggested. And generally, it always gets paid. So, that might be a way that you could address a poor percentage of board giving, but certainly things to think about. Rubber stamping, so board members getting into the habit of just saying okay on everything for the sake of nobody wants to bring something up. And then chief
Cindy?
exec, yes, ma'am.
Can you share what your request is of them, what the amount is?
$250. So they have to pay, they have to be a member of the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber. So of course their membership fee, they're paying that, but then they have to give an additional $250.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Can I ask another question about the amount?
You can.
Is that clear when they agree to be on the board? And I ask that just knowing that I've been part of conversations and some of that through the program I'm in, but about equity and making sure that people are able to be on the board who don't have, financial means because they can contribute in other ways, or they can help fundraise by attending or planning or putting in the work. Just maybe what you think about that, or.
Yeah. So again, that's a suggested amount for us. And we discuss it when we send them the documents, or we discuss the document, the board member agreement. It's in our board member agreement. So again, having that board member agreement prepared to have a conversation with them about serving on the board and going over each of those things in that agreement, it's in our agreement. So they know up front before they commit. But we also let them know that is a suggested amount. And even though it's suggested amount, we have board members that say we'll contribute 500, because they're able to do that. But we certainly don't want to exclude somebody that can't afford. And we do have a couple of people on our board that really can't do that $250. And we'll accept, as long as they fill out that commitment form and say, this is what we are committing to. If it's $100, that's fine. But we make sure that we're clear in that conversation that we have with them, because we don't ever want to leave somebody out because they don't have an additional $250. And I think that's, really important, especially if you want to get people on your board that have lived experience that they want to be able to share on the board or whatever. I think that's important. Okay, we're almost done here. So step number 9, I know it's 1 o'clock. I'll try to hurry. If you have to get off, as a matter of fact, I'm going to launch a poll real quick. So while we're going through these last couple of slides really quick, you can give us some feedback because we need this for this training. I don't know what it is with my technology today, but it's not working right. So the last slide, I know I don't have it up because I have the poll up, but it's really just, I want to tell you to make sure in step number 9 of your life cycle that you celebrate. So make sure that you recognize the progress that your organization's made, that the board has made, bring the board alongside in that celebration, the accomplishments, whether it's accomplishments of staff, the organization, the board members, make sure that you celebrate, make sure you show appreciation for those contributions, not only financial contributions, but the individual contributions that people are making to the board, to the organization, to the community, and then make room for humor and a good laugh, because that's really important as well for your organization to just to remember to laugh. Sometimes we go through some really serious stuff, and it's things can be challenging. And I know that we've had, can you all see that poll? Okay.
Yeah, but it's not letting me submit it.
It's not?
No.
Oh my goodness.
Is it maybe because you're still presenting? I don't know.
No, I stopped share, so I don't know. Man, could I have more technical problems today? Well, would you all do me a favor? If I sent you out a short poll, would you answer that? Because they need feedback for this, for their grant on the survey for this thing. So again, you all, I will send you out all of this information. That's really all of I have, unless you have any questions. I know it's 1:03. No worries, Paige, that you had to get that call. I get it. But I'll send you out a survey. I'll send you out all these documents. And if you have any questions, I'd certainly love to have what your questions are. Sorry for all the technical difficulties today. I don't know. It's a Monday. That's all I can say. Anything else from anybody?
Thank you.
Remember,
Thank
we're
you.
here. We're here if you need anything. That's what we do. You're all members. We're always happy to help.
Thanks for going with the flow.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.